I'd like to begin with the first part of a poem I wrote 2 years ago in an ethnic studies course and had the honor of presenting at a BLM protest this summer. It's called Si Pudiera Cambiar el Mundo, If I Could Change the World. If I could change the world, no human would be illegal, ICE wouldn't come and break down the door, and kids wouldn't cry for their mama y papa who just got ripped away. Ripped away like the dreams of Sandra Bland, Trayvon Martin, Tanisha Anderson. The kids on the block wouldn't have to worry about the red, white, and blue and where their hands are before they shoot. Hello, I'm Alexis Gonzales. I'm a first-generation Latina college graduate and a current high school teacher in Denver Public Schools. I became a teacher not from my positive experiences in school, but more so because of the negative experiences my siblings and I encountered. I, for one, didn't like school, but fortunately for me, I was someone who was good at school. I became a teacher in hopes that my students would receive a more socially just education that represents them and where they come from. So far in 2020, I have student taught, graduated from college, applied for jobs, and started my first year teaching. I know, impeccable timing. My first year teaching has been a mix of beautiful chaos and a rude awakening. I quickly realized that you can come into education aspiring to do all of these things and create permanent change. But if you don't have the right kind of support, it becomes impossible. Or if a pandemic strikes, it just becomes impossible. I want to translate these times and themes into action, and the current moment is presenting me with both an opportunity and a challenge to reimagine what curriculum could be like and the supports a teacher needs to actually do that. One piece of advice I was given as I started teaching was just to follow the rules, follow the curriculum I was given, and not push back on what I was told to do. As a first-year teacher, this seemed easy to manage. Just follow the curriculum I was given and teach. But as an ethnic studies graduate, I knew I would be doing a disservice to my students if I stayed silent and became a part of the system. Although it was the most convenient option, I knew my complacency served no one and was not in the best interest of my students. And actually, instead of this advice being easy for me to take, this in fact has been the hardest part of my job, being quiet and following the rules. There are a lot of things I feel hopeless about in education that have made me feel too small to change anything. But I think a low-stake and highly beneficial, long overdue change is curriculum. What do I mean by this? We have to start with the spectrum of history to look at the present, and not what the US textbooks and US history teach us, but the real history through the lens of ethnic studies. This is the way we're going to be able to make change right now with students. This is difficult because it would mean changing an entire system. And changing an entire system in education, as Jeff Duncan Andale would say, would be to experiment on kids, and no one wants to do that. But when it comes to curriculum, we have nothing to lose, and we have no choice if we actually want to make real change in the world. When I wrote this poem, I thought about a lot of the things I learned in ethnic studies. I mostly thought to myself, what could the world look like if all students learn this curriculum early in their lives? We need to be intentional in teaching about scholars of color, activists of color, and social justice issues all year long, not only during Hispanic Heritage Month or Black History Month. It's never been so loud and clear to me until a student said, "Miss, why do we only get a month and white history gets 10 months? But wait, this is America, the land of the free, the home of the brave, the American dream, the dream that truly feels like only a dream because we are still fighting for what our ancestors fought for. The fights we're still fighting to keep kids in school rather than prisons. The fights we're still fighting to allow women to have rights over their own bodies. The fights we're still fighting to stop criminalizing Black and brown bodies. The fights we're still fighting para tener los derechos que tienen los gringos. But why won't they listen to us when we say we can't breathe? Because we live in a white blizzard that teaches us to hold our breath and bite our tongue. What I'm trying to say is that if I, as a teacher, have to learn about and become an expert on Shakespeare and George Orwell, then it's necessary for other teachers to learn and become experts on the actual history of the US and its implications on society today, whether we see it or not. Teachers who are familiar with Shakespeare, Orwell, and Socrates should start to become familiar with scholars like Paulo Freire and Angela Davis, and not for the recognition, but to actually be able to implement curriculum responsive to this in schools. By explicitly excluding socially just anti-racist curriculum, we are silencing students and their full potential. Ibram X. Kendi notes this in his recent book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, when he writes, "Why would any university want an idiot on their campus who can't understand Shakespeare? It never occurred to me that maybe I wasn't really trying to understand Shakespeare, and that's why I dropped out of my English 2 International Baccalaureate class during my senior year." We are notably disengaging and disenfranchising students every day by only teaching what has been taught for so long and what colonial culture has deemed valuable. I'll learn the classics, but my culture matters too. What about my classics? Our classics. Si pudiera cambiar el mundo, if I could change the world, they wouldn't be teaching about Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez only during Hispanic Heritage Month. The teachers who are teaching my kids wouldn't be teaching them about MLK and Malcolm X only during Black History Month. Because let's be honest, do the white teachers even know who Bunchy Carter and Fred Hampton are? Why do we get told our tacos are good, but our cultura is not? Why is Mexico a place full of quote-unquote drugs and criminals, yet they still go there for paradise and spring break? Why is our language prohibited because this is America and we speak English? When considering how we develop and implement anti-racist curriculum, we have to stop relying on the words equitable and culturally relevant. They get overused and are often misaligned. Instead, let's ask, how is what I'm teaching either centering or decentering whiteness? This is the biggest question I ask myself all the time. I acknowledge that a systemic change in curriculum isn't the only change we need in education, but it's a place to start. Even while implementing socially just anti-racist curriculum, there is still a lot of work to be done to address the inequities in education. We also need to dismantle and rebuild policies and practices that disrupt systems of oppression. A start to this could be what is deemed professional. For instance, when one of my students said Kanye 2020, and we took the time to stop and address his comment. Maybe for some people, addressing that comment would have been seen as too political and unprofessional, but it was necessary. My students didn't exactly see and understand the complexities of money, class, and capitalism. Taking on that content allowed me to push my students to be critical thinkers and be more aware of the implications of their thinking. We have to reevaluate what we consider professional in education. What are the implications of that word in terms of race, class, gender, and other systems of oppression? Who decides what professional means? Angela Davis said, "I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept." I'm sharing my story and my words with you today because I have a dream for myself as a teacher, for my students, for this country, and for the world. If we make it our obligation to implement a socially just, anti-racist curriculum with the history we know is inspiring change in the world right now, then we can begin to treat the wound that has been damaging students, education, and this country for so long. Here's the end of the poem. Si pudiera cambiar el mundo, if I could change the world, my people would be valued. They would be considered intelligent, not uneducated. Not uneducated because of a language barrier, not uneducated because mi abuela doesn't know what a logarithm is, not uneducated because mi abuela doesn't know what an idiom is. Intelligent. Si yo pudiera cambiar el mundo, if I could change the world, we'd have to stop saying si se puede, yes you can, and start saying si se pudo, yes we did. Y eso es lo que yo haría si yo pudiera cambiar el mundo. And that's what I would do if I could change the world. Thank you.